did some of that last year. So, you know, we'll have our hands full with the way they play, and I'm sure we'll be in a very good environment, and you know, it'd be good for our guys to play in another game like that.
They've lost, I think, 3 in a row, but 2 of those last 3 have come against like top 5 teams.
Yeah.
What have you seen from them in those games?
You know what? They're playing better. They've played really well in the last week. Michigan and Virginia are teams that could be in the Final Four, and you know, they've had good opportunities in both games. I think their guys are getting more comfortable. I think he's got them playing more like the way he wants them to play, and they're kind of understanding some things. You know, I thought they played incredibly well against Michigan up there. That was really impressive when you watch the way the game was played, the flow of the game, some of the decisions their guys made, and then the competitive fight in a difficult environment. You know, similarly, I thought they played well for a good part of the Virginia game. The Virginia guys are just so good. Their guards are so good that, you know, they made a couple big-time plays, shots to kind of get away from it. But, you know, they're just, you know, it's what you would expect. I think these teams continue to get better the longer the year goes, and he's playing a lot of young guys. And so when you're playing young guys like that, for those guys to play the way they did in those 2 games, to me really shows that they're making a lot of progress.
Their style of play, do you compare it to someone that you see in the ACC?
Florida State is probably somebody that similarly plays that aggressive defensive style where they make it difficult for you to run your stuff. You know, you have to simplify your packages, and your players have to make more plays in these kinds of games. It's less about, you know, coaches and play calling and things of that nature than it is more about, you know, your players playing confidently and you know, making good fundamental basketball plays against pressure defense. And you know, I said they've done a nice job of mixing in zone. I thought it was effective against Virginia the other day. You know, it was a little bit effective against us last year some. So, you know, we know that the way they play is not something that you see, you know, every week. You only see it a few times a year, and Florida State is probably the team in our league that is the most like that.
You guys have both had your fair share of injuries. Just how does that play into? You
know, it's hard for both of us. I think you can see there are times when it's just the rhythm and timing of your team is not as good as it should be, and you're not as confident because you've got guys out there that aren't quite as confident. You know, was watching our film from last year's game. You know, we looked like a confident team. Like, it was just evident. Coach Simmons, one of our new coaches, like, that was one thing that he thought jumped right off the page, was just how our guys were pretty poised and very comfortable and confident and aggressive, and we didn't always make good plays, but there was no hesitation. And I think when you don't have everybody all the time practicing, you know, Frank's going through the same thing where it's just your practices aren't as good, and so you're not competing as hard against each other as you need to. And then when you get in very challenging games, you know, guys break down because they're just not used to doing it as much. And you're also doing it with guys that probably aren't quite as talented and experienced. And it's, you know, it's something you deal with, but it is good experience for the guys that are getting it.
How is Marquise coming along?
He's doing better. You know, he might have an outside chance of playing Saturday some. He suited up yesterday and you know, did mostly non-contact work. He did do a little bit of, we had him in a few defensive things that were probably 3/4 speed. Today he's going to try to do a little bit more, and we'll just see how it responds. But he's improved a lot in the last probably 2 to 3 days, and you know, again, I don't know, it's probably more of a game time to see. Some will be based on how he finishes, how he does in parts of practice that he does today.
With the way Eli played on Tuesday, do you see him progressing like you want to right now?
Yeah, I think Eli is, you know, much better than he was at the start of the season, and that's just it's like I said a while back, he just needed 2-3 weeks of consistent practices, just work himself into shape, confidence, just comfortable in the offense again, and then guys playing with him. I think the other thing is when you don't play with a guy like Eli, you're just not used to having a guy who's that good. And so you're not looking inside quite as much. And now all of a sudden he's out there every day in practice, and the head coach is saying, hey, we got to make sure we're looking inside. And now, instead of ball reversal, it's a catch and a look inside. And so our team is getting better at finding him because we've been in practice for 2 weeks hearing that message. And, he certainly is moving up and down the floor better. He's guarding better. He just needed time. And he started to do that. He's staying after. He's doing all the things he needs to do to be a good player. And so I'm comfortable and confident that he's starting to play his best basketball this season.
That game against Michigan that South Carolina had, is that maybe for 3/4 of that game the best they've played this year, even though it was a loss?
Probably, yeah, I think so. I mean, and I thought they played well for they probably played well 28-30 minutes of the Virginia game. I really, and that's part of how this works. When you play really good teams like that, you're going to play well, and not always win. I always tell you guys that's one of the challenging things about coaching is when your team is playing hard and playing well and it doesn't result in a win, you got to go back out there the next day and still compete and fight. But I thought they looked really, really good in the Michigan game. To go into that environment against a team who's playing about as well as anybody in the country, and to play them the way they did, I thought with young players, really showed a lot. And then to back it up, again, I think both those teams are potentially Final Four teams, and to play Virginia in a good way for a long period of the game speaks to the fact that South Carolina is really improving. They're turning the corner. Their kids are getting better. They're freshmen, and I think some of it looks like he's getting a little more comfortable with some of his lineups and what he's doing. And obviously in the Virginia game, they did it without a couple kids. So, he and I we've both had to deal with a little bit of injury stuff. And, I feel like they're turning the corner though and looking at the way they're playing.
You obviously don't want an injury, but is there a bright side in that you're getting some of these younger guys some playing time in big spots?
Yeah, I mean, it's good that guys are getting more minutes. We certainly, even if Marquise plays, he really hasn't practiced much for 3 weeks, and so he's not going to be, in great rhythm and timing and all those kinds of things. So, that part of it is always hard, and just getting guys back from injury. But obviously the bright side is hopefully that, Clyde Trapp has gotten to play 28, 29 minutes a game for 3 games. John Newman's minutes he's probably gotten 8-10 more minutes. Hunter Tyson's probably got 3 or 4 more minutes, 5 more minutes. So there is a benefit to some other guys if they take advantage of it. And, we'll see how it goes here moving forward. But, it's nice that those guys are getting some extra time right now. What's best for our team in the long run is we need to get everybody healthy, get back to where we can practice against one another and develop some rhythm and flow. And that's what we need to do.
Brad, you've been around a while here with the rivalry. It's a little different than the football as far as intensity, but what's when you look back at the rivalry since you've been here, what's something that you can look at and go, that was just one of those moments where it just made you think, yeah, this is a rivalry, either with a fan or in the game experience?
Well, I mean, you go to both places and, you're probably going to get called a few names, and it's a little bit more intense. You can tell that, you watch sometimes the crowds of their games or our games leading into the games, and they're not as good as them when we usually play each other. There's more people there. They're a little more animated. There's a little more juice in the building. It's you can feel that it's important, and both teams are really compete hard in the game, and so from that standpoint, there's no doubt that you can tell it's a little bit of a different game than some of the others we play. It certainly more resembles an important ACC game. It feels like that for us, that a big game in your league against somebody that is doing well. And I think there's a healthy respect between the programs and the coaches. Frank and I like each other and get along really well, and we both feel similarly about how the game should be played, and so there's a respect in how we do things. We don't do things exactly the same, but because of that, you know, he and I have always gotten along and had a mutual respect for how the other person does their job and competes at it the way that the kids on the teams play. So from that standpoint, I think it's always been very